Hi, this is Andy Orm from O'Reilly, and I'm talking today with Sau Sheong Chang, who is the author of Exploring Everyday Things with Ruby and R, a book that will be coming out very soon. This is a pretty interesting topic. It's really a bunch of different topics, different things that people can look at in everyday life, and it's a sort of guide to looking for other things in your everyday life that you might want to measure and do statistics on. I wonder, Sao Sheng, how did you get into this? How did you decide to start looking at everyday things?
So the idea of the book came to me really from a suggestion from a friend because I do blog and I used to blog quite a lot, although since writing the book, obviously it has taken a lot of my time away from blogging. But I used to blog about things that happened to me, and then basically I go a bit deeper into each one of them. For example, the first chapter of the book um, talking about simulating the frequency of people visiting the bathrooms basically is a an idea I got when I moved to a new company, and we were debating among my colleagues on whether there will be enough bathrooms to fit for everyone in that particular office. And that sort of one thing sort of lead to another, and then we started, or rather, I started gathering data, doing simulations, and then eventually that came out to be a blog post. And I do a number of these things quite frequently. In fact, I'm sort of infamous among my friends to actually delve into a lot of these minute little things. And after a collection of these blog posts, I thought, why not I try for a book, and the rest, I suppose, is history.
So instead of, what do you have, a disagreement with someone, instead of look it up on Wikipedia, now it's run some statistics and do a little data visualization.
That's right. So instead of reading up somewhere, why not I do it? Just do it. So why not I just go ahead and get all the data out, get the simulation out, and make it as real as possible to the real thing, and then see the results. Because I don't really know how it will go. I will just run the thing up to a point in time where I actually find a result, and then I put it down on paper.
So in addition to the little bathroom chapter, which was very amusing, you do some fairly serious things with economics and with other stuff. And I wonder, what is your procedure? How do you say, I've got a problem here and I'm going to collect the data that will solve the problem?
So I do enjoy reading quite a bit, and whenever I read up on something, I would always try to think, um, can I run an experiment on that? Can I actually write a program on that? So I would do a little bit of digging. I don't have any particular uh, process where I follow through. It's more of a wandering. I would actually look up a topic, and I will wander around until something strikes my interest, and then I'll delve deeper into it. Just like the economics one that you just mentioned.
Hmm.
What I did was I was reading this book about the armchair economist, and I read it on the topics, and it was very interesting for me. And I read more economics books, and I thought, so can I actually simulate something like the invisible hand of Adam Smith? And after a while, I tried it, did a bit of programming on it, and I came up with the results. So that's the normal thing that I do, really, from things that interest me.
And in that case, you came up with a sort of a law there, just like people talk about power laws and other certain things that turn up over and over in different
Hmm.
areas of life. This income gap problem is sort of a intractable problem, it seems.
Yes. So I do a bit of exploration. I was always very interested in voids, and I read up on a particular topic in that, and I did a lot of simulations. And of course, the Occupy movement was very big then, and I think it's probably still now. And I did some comparisons, and I thought, hey, that could be quite apt, and so I put it down on paper as well. So it's nothing particularly deliberate about the topics I choose. It just so happens to come about as I explore and I wander. And I suppose that's the reason why I put the title of my book to be Exploring Everyday Things. So it's really about my ramblings and my explorations on various topics I encounter. And I want to actually translate that into something that the people would want to do as well, because exploring and this kind of wanderings through programming is interesting. And I wanted others to actually enjoy the same thing as I do as well.
So naturally, you used R because it's open source and it's fairly simple to learn for at least certain operations. And it seems like you sort of wrap your statistical work with Ruby, and a lot of the time for the visualizations you use shoes, good old shoes. That was interesting.
Yes, so I've been a Rubyist for about 6 years. Ruby is a particular passion of mine. And about 2 years ago, I learned R, and I found it to be a very useful tool for my explorations. So instead of doing a lot of this kind of simulations and data analysis using Ruby, which can sometimes be a bit more difficult because Ruby is not really the language for this kind of explorations, I decided to do it in R instead. And I thought R and Ruby could be a very good combination, whereas I use Ruby to do all the pre-processing of data, to do the simulations, to do the gathering of data, to basically get all the data into a single place. And then from that single place, I use R to run through and process the data to get the results that I want to find.
And I actually realized
So,
I misspoke
mm,
before because a lot of the visualization is done through graphing in R. I remember.
yes, a lot of the visualization is done through graphing in R.
But you did
Um,
some user interaction using
mhm.
shoes. That allowed the user to interact with the screen, if I remember.
Yes, yes. So a particular chapter in the book, I use shoes because I wanted to have a visual representation of the simulation, because normally it's quite boring to see simulations that do nothing for a while, and then suddenly there would be a data file that you can get can import into R and process it. I wanted to get something that's more visible, that's something that people can actually see what's going on. And I thought the Boyd simulation was something that's interesting enough for that particular kind of exploration.
Yeah, this was flocking, right? Flocking
That's
behavior.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. I use shoes because shoes happens to be the the framework that's probably the easiest to use and explain in a book, because the other frameworks are a little bit more convoluted, um, and you really need to uh, delve much deeper into the framework itself. Whereas shoes is still very much everyday Ruby, and I think that's perfect for as exploration and kind of writing a book, basically.
Yes, I think you had very readable code. And certainly people can choose other libraries. They can choose Python if they want, but they can certainly get through your book fairly quickly as long as they have a little programming experience.
Yes, precisely.
When you were researching the topics for this book, what was the most surprising thing that you found out?
So a number of things. Most of these explorations I go through, I do not actually know the end result before I actually go through them. So sometimes the end result is, of course, not surprising, like the economics one, right? Because I was basically simulating the invisible hand, and if that didn't turn out the way I expected it to be, then I would be very shocked. But some of the others were a bit more surprising, like the bathroom one. Like, that was surprising. Um, the ones that I did exploration on the emails in the Enron case, the data set that came from Enron, that sort of gave me a bit of a surprise. But I think the biggest surprise was the um, the response I get from people when I actually explain some of these things. For example, the one I did on money, sex, and evolution. I tried to explain what I did, and I actually did a number of presentations to people just to explain the results of what I've done. And I get very interesting response. Some people were very intrigued, and others were less intrigued, I would put it that way. So I think the response of people who would to the reaction of people to the research and the ideas that I have in the book were the ones that was most surprising to me.
I suppose if you did try to take some of your conclusions and bring them back into politics and economics, then the
Hmm.
experts could pile on and say your model was not that accurate or something like that.
That's right.
But it was
That's
still
right.
very interesting. I also, and that reminds me also that you develop your models very interesting in ways. You start out sometimes with very simple things. You build on them. It's rather an agile process, and probably it's a good learning process for the people reading the book.
Yes, I would always try to start off with something simple because that's how I would approach it. I would approach it with something that's very basic, something that's very simple at very base level. Then I would add on additional things that I would want to do research on, and add on extra realism, for example, or extra variables, or I would make it a little bit more complex. So we could actually build up something to be something that's more realistic in the end. So the idea is to slowly and gently introduce readers to what are the possibilities. Because I believe if it's a direct jump from concept, the idea, and directly coming up with the results, then you miss out a lot of the fun because the fun part of it is really in the journey, not just finding out the result. Of course, finding out the result is nice, it's interesting, and it could be very surprising or shocking, but it's the journey that's the most enjoyable, I believe.
And the reader could take many of your projects and just keep going and use the same iterative process to get closer and closer to real life.
That's right. So I actually put all my source code on GitHub, so anyone could just take it and expand on it and fork it out and do stuff with it, and basically do more exploration. But beyond that, I was really hoping that the idea that I introduced, that you could actually explore the world around you using code, using programming, and to use programming beyond what or rather what I do professionally on a daily basis, which is really to write business applications and applications for end users, like normal web applications, business applications, and so on. But use it for something that's beyond that, because there's a bigger world that you can actually use all these skills and put it to better use, perhaps.
Yeah, I do get a sense of a big world out there when I read the book. I'll just end by asking if there are some easy mistakes that you find people can make. Anything you could warn people about doing when they are trying out projects.
Yeah, I think the the biggest mistake I would suppose that I've actually encountered as well is to easily fall into the trap that to believe that the simulations is the real world and simulations are perfect, because as anyone who writes code would know, you would introduce bugs in your code as it becomes more complex. And also your assumptions on the models could be wrong in the beginning, and therefore your answers, which could be very logical, following on to the models, could end up to be totally wrong because your models were wrong in the first place. So that would be my advice, to really not to be very to be more flexible in the approach in saying, look, I'm trying out this model first, and it turns out this results. Could I tweak the model a bit, and or change the model here? Could I get a different result? And how would that affect the end result? To basically go through different models to find the best model to fit, and not just choose one model and be very convinced that the end result is the only result.
Yeah, I think all of us sort of wish that we could measure things the way physicists with super colliders do, and they know exactly where the meson is. But um,
Yeah,
yeah, life is not like that.
absolutely.
Mhm. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sau Sheong. The book will be out fairly soon, and it's been a real pleasure to
Thanks,
talk
Andy.
to you.
You too.